Thank you to Helix for sponsoring today's video.
After a hard day's work, everyone looks forward to a good night's sleep. Helix Sleep makes premium mattresses and bedding that are custom to fit your needs and conveniently shipped right to your door. Helix knows everyone is different, so they made the sleep quiz to match your unique body type and sleep preferences to make the perfect mattress for you. Based on our results, Helix matched us with the Helix Dusk Luxe. It's perfect for couples with different sleeping preferences and has a medium feel that's not too firm and not too soft. It's super comfortable. With your Helix Sleep mattress, you get a 100-night sleep trial along with a 10-year warranty. There's also financing options and flexible payment plans. You get more than 3 months to make sure you love it. If you don't, they'll pick it up for you and you'll get a full refund. The best part is that Helix delivers your mattress right to your door for free within the US. It comes rolled up in a box and it's super easy to set up. We love our Helix and think you would too. If you're looking for a new bed, check out Helix. Click on the link below or go to helixsleep.com/redpoppy for up to $200 off your Helix Sleep mattress plus 2 free pillows.
So this is what I was able to get done yesterday. That's as far back into the hill as I want to go. I need to go a little further in this corner and then kind of square things off. And then I need to get everything as level as I can possibly get it, and then I'll start bringing railroad ties up here. At some point I have to dig over here and tie into this water line and get that water line roughed in before I get too far on the stacking railroad ties. But my gut feeling is I don't have anywhere near enough railroad ties, and they're not exactly inexpensive right now. So well, here we go again. This is one of these projects where I put a tremendous amount of thought into, but I'm still a bit unsure of the end result. I don't want to break up any more of this native soil than I have to. If I do my job right, there will only be about an 18-inch to 24-inch gap between the railroad ties and the dirt wall. And then I'll backfill that dirt wall with all of this dirt that I dug out initially. But before I backfill, I need to get everything as level as I possibly can and then start the process of stacking the railroad ties. There was a time when working with railroad ties was fairly inexpensive and even free, and I'll just say that's not the case here and now, so I don't want to do this again. The little Kubota excavator is working out perfectly. It's not too big and it's not too small. I'm able to get into these tight spots and the excavator has just enough power to get things done. But before I can set these tanks, I gotta make sure there is not one single rock that could potentially hurt that tank. The inside dimensions of this shed need to be at least 8 feet by 16 feet. Okay, that would probably be too tight because the tanks are exactly 8 feet across and I think they're 9 feet tall. But the railroad ties are 9 feet long, and so I'm trying to do this in a way where I don't waste these railroad ties. They're incredibly expensive right now. But I don't want the shed to be any bigger than it has to be, but I also don't want it so tight that I can't get in there and service those tanks when I need to. So. A 9-foot long number 1 railroad tie should weigh somewhere between 150 and as much as 225 pounds. If it's a good quality railroad tie and still in good condition, then it's going to be more heavy. The truth is, I hate them. They're miserable to move around, they're miserable to work with, they're miserable to cut. But they're heavy duty and they last forever. And I'm not prepared to take the kind of time and spend the kind of money that it would take to do this in concrete. And that's about the only other option that I would consider. So I need to figure out how to make these railroad ties work. I'm fully aware of the chemicals that are used to make railroad ties and telephone poles and pressure-treated lumber for that matter. The water will never be in contact with any of these chemicals at any time because of the storage tanks. I also considered doing this entire project out of cinder block as well. And it wasn't so much about the expense cost with cinder blocks as much as it was about time. But I have all the confidence that the railroad ties can and will hold the dirt back that they need to hold back, assuming again that I do my job right. And every single one of these railroad ties will end up with somewhere between 2 and 4 12-inch spikes driven through them. Okay, I'm using 12-inch smooth shank galvanized spikes. And these railroad ties are so hard and so dense that I have to pre-drill the holes in order to get these spikes driven through them. Otherwise, I usually end up bending the spikes. Again, the railroad ties are 9 feet long, so the length and the width of the structure are relative to the length of the railroad ties, which will keep the waste to a minimum, but also allows me to stagger the joints, which will make the structure stronger. The only downside is I have to cut many of these railroad ties in half. The railroad ties are heavy enough that I try to do my part with the excavator to keep the lifting to a minimum, but I have to adjust all of them perfectly before they can be drilled and then nailed. Everything about this job is miserable. It's too hot outside. Just moving the ties around, you get scratched up everywhere. But I'm super curious to see if this works out the way that I think it will. The inside opening will barely be big enough for both tanks, so if I ever have to remove one of these tanks, the roof will have to come off. Once I get the back wall high enough with the railroad tie, which should be somewhere right around 9 feet, I'm going to wrap the outside of the railroad ties in a 6mm plastic, and then I'm going to hang that plastic in a way where I can lay a French drain over the top of the plastic before I backfill. Then I'm going to carefully backfill around the French drain that will exit on the front of the new watershed. Then after that's in place, I have to carefully backfill everything else with the excavator without damaging that French drain. And then once all of the dirt is backfilled, I get to grade the dirt in a way where as the snow melts or as the rain falls, that water goes away from the underground shed as much as possible. And then if I happen to live that long, I'm going to build some sort of a roof that can be either easily removed or possibly even have a hinge on the roof. So if a tank ever has to be removed and replaced, it can be done. But it wouldn't be that hard for me to frame up a roof structure that could be removed in maybe 3 or 4 different pieces. But for the most part, this is a big giant science project, and it's going to take a few years to figure out who in fact wins. But I'm confident, at least for a time, that I will. Concern is that with time, the dirt behind the building will freeze and move around enough to where it will require attention again. But maybe the water temperature inside the tanks that will be stored inside this building will stay consistent enough that the dirt no longer freezes around the place, and maybe it won't move around as much as I think it will. What I have found over the last few years is that the water temperature coming out of our shallow well, even on the coldest days in winter, never gets a whole lot colder than about 45 degrees. Which means by the time the water gets to the storage tanks, it's actually quite a bit warmer than the ambient temperature outside. Whenever I have to do work around the shallow well in the middle of winter, it's always shocking to me that the ground is not frozen and the snow almost always melts off around the well first. In the insulated shed up on the hill that I built a few years ago, I've never even come close to having a pipe freeze inside that shed. But what I'm trying to do here is utilize the natural temperature of the earth once you get down into the earth a little bit. People have been doing this for 1,000,000 years. And all I'm trying to do is to keep everything inside this building from freezing. The last thing that I will do once I get both new tanks installed and hooked up, I will then use a battery-powered thermometer to keep inside this room that I can constantly check on as needed with my phone. None of these railroad ties are perfect. The way the railroad ties are made, only one of the 4 sides is totally and completely flat, but they twist and they move around, so I have to selectively place them where they will best work. But every seam is overlapped by a full-length railroad tie, so this thing should be pretty structurally sound by the time I'm done. On the front side, I only need to be about 8 feet tall, and I do need a pitch on the roof, so I'll have to take that into consideration as well. The hardest part of this job is by far stacking and moving the railroad ties because we have limited space up here. If I had a grapple on the excavator, it would make light work of the railroad ties, but it's a rental excavator and I'm making it work the best that I can. This doorway right here will be the only access to the inside of the shed once the water tanks have been set in place. And it's going to be a tight fit, but I'll be able to bleach the tanks as I like to do a couple times a year as needed. It's the end of the day, and I just broke a Sawzall blade while trying to cut this railroad tie. Don't turn the Sawzall on while trying to put a new blade in. It hurts. After pinching my finger enough to ensure that my fingernail's coming off, I threw a band-aid on and it's time to get back to work. Because I'm nowhere near as far along as I thought I would be at this point in time. And again, it's a rental excavator, so at some point I gotta take it back. I considered putting in a floor drain inside this building if in fact any water did get in there, but I think what I've decided to do is throw a little extra dirt in there when I am backfilling and raise the floor level up a couple of inches higher than it is outside. And then by doing that, water should naturally follow the path of least resistance and it shouldn't accumulate inside the shed. I think I know how this story ends, but as I said earlier, it's going to take a few years to get this one figured out. But my gut feeling is this will last a long, long time if I can figure out how to keep the water away from the outside of the building, as all of the snow melts in the springtime. Sometimes you just don't know unless you try, and I suppose this is a bit of a gamble, but if I didn't think it would work, I wouldn't have wasted my time. So I will continue to use the excavator to stack the railroad ties, nail them off, and get it up to about that 9-foot mark. And then we're going to start by getting the first tank set in place. and then I'll make the water connection, and hopefully I can do this while keeping the family in water the entire time. Once both tanks have been relocated down here to this shed, and once all the dirt work around the building has been done, I then get to take down the old metal building, and if I have enough time, I'm going to build some sort of a lookout where I can bring my wife up, and we can sit and watch the sunsets in the evenings, at least in the summertime. For the next week to 10 days, I'm not going to work on anything but this water tank shed until it's done. This morning, we woke up and it was a touch cold outside, so I know my days are numbered. So I want to make sure this one's all buttoned up before the rain and then eventually the snow sets in. But if all goes well, I should have the majority done by next Sunday. And then I'm going to sneak over to the new property with the excavator and hopefully clean up all of the stuff that I've been cutting down in the last couple of weeks. But this is one of the last big projects of the summer. I'll get back to the propane tank and then the rock wall and then ultimately the shop as the weather changes. And we'll see if we can't get that wrapped up too. We hope you are all doing very well, and we wanted to thank you again for taking time to watch our videos. The next couple of videos are going to be all about the process and the progress of the underground water tank shed. And we'll see you guys in a few days. So I am working on my 11th course, and I have another 16 railroad ties up here, and I'm hoping that's enough. But I need to get that back wall up at least another 3 courses, I'm guessing, to get above grade. But we're getting close. I'm over moving these railroad ties around, but we're getting close here. Oh, mackerel.